Happy Monday and happy Rosh Chodesh, new moon. Here we go. Let's turn the calendar. We're in the month of Av. And I want to give a framing for the month, and then we'll drop into our sit. So, as Rebecca said, I care about looking at the present moment and with lots of different lenses. And one of them, my Judaism, my Jewish spirituality, to help me understand what's happening right now. So right now it's the first day of Av, 5784, and Av is a month that is a really unique one because we kind of start in one place, but we end in a totally different one. We are currently in those 3 weeks of mourning that started in Tammuz, where we are experiencing grief and we hold sacred space for that sadness and those tears, and that there's a time for us to cry. And there's been a lot of things to cry about in the past, including the destruction of both temples, which will be honored on the 9th of Av, and also many, many things in our current life that are sad. And this month teaches us to hold the space for that loss and for that grief that we experience in our life and in community. But by the full moon of this month, which is known as Tu B'Av, there's a shift that happens where we are in a place of love and heartfulness. And so the month actually teaches us to experience those feelings of sorrow, but then also through community and through awareness, transform it into rebuilding and renewal and love and dancing and joy and the gift of feeling those. And so one of the important ways that we can sit through the range of those feelings is to be present and really listen to what each of those emotions are telling us, so that we can be present with our sorrows, so that we can also be present with our joys. And so that we can listen to the grief that happens in the first half of this month and in these 3 weeks that we're in now, that I'm sure will be present on daily sits for the next 9 days. And then we also embrace the duality of what will come by the end of the month. And when my colleague Jenna comes on for the full moon, making that shift in the second part of the month towards the love. So with that, I want to invite us to drop into our practice and find ourselves in our comfortable seat and get ready to actually be comforted by each other's presence in our ability to quest through these hard emotions together. So find your feet, find your body. Let's drop into the present moment together. Feel free to allow your eyes to close or lie down. Find some place where you can come to some stillness. Close down whatever sense doors you need in order to drop into your breath. And we'll inhale together and exhale. Taking a couple more of those sacred breaths, inhaling some soulfulness. Exhaling, putting it out. Or imagine we're all in our own individual Zoom rooms, all 175 of us, but we're here together in the present moment. And so, although we might not be able to hear each other's audible exhales, we can certainly have the intent and the feeling of us being together in our place of contemplation, in our individual practices, but comforted by the fact that we're together with others. So we'll dedicate some breaths now to sending your exhales out to our community. And maybe anybody else you want to dedicate your sit to today. And now let's start shifting our awareness to the idea that today is the beginning of 5784. Notice what you can hear in your body around the idea of a new month. Keeping our keen sense for listening to our body, I want us to play with the duality of the month. Allow yourself to feel the beginning part of the month. Continued sadness. In the summer months in Jewish time, we get hot. Things get destroyed. And there's grief. Allow yourself to play with and sit with and experience the grief and sadness that's happening right now. Without it coming onto you, but from a place of awareness. Notice what these emotions and how they show up in your body. Notice what the emotions, how they feel in your listening of your breath and your body. Immediately for me, even thinking about sadness, my throat gets tight, my chest caves in. I'm curious for you where your body tells you you're feeling those emotions. And try to be with it. Try to be with that feeling without needing to push it away or do anything to it. Just noticing what it feels like to create sacredness around our grief. We know our sages teach us wisdom from Ecclesiastes. There's nothing new under the sun. And in Jewish time, these 3 weeks are sacred for us to hold the human experience of sadness. What's the lesson that we can hear here? While we also do the same for us and what's true for us in our lives. But what can we hear about the lesson to carve out the space to feel that? Noticing the rhythm of your breath, inhaling and exhaling, and noticing if it's gotten tight or any other kind of restriction. And just coming back to that place. Now, with tenderness and attention, beginning to shift our awareness and mind's eye towards the second half of this month. That when the full moon comes, forever in time, in Jewish time, there's a shift. There's a transformation that happens. And imagine yourself with our sacred community being in a place of love, of renewal, And notice what happens to the physical body when we turn our mind's eye towards that place of openness and joy. And imagine yourself being surrounded by people that you love, doing something that you love. And give yourself permission that the corners or spaces or body sensations that felt restricted in the first half of the month can be nourished fully by the second half of the month. And that there's a time for crying tears of sadness, and there's a time for crying tears of joy. And Av is the contrast where we learn to do that. In our last couple of moments here together, I invite you to recall that sacred community we have here with each other, and also those we're dedicating our practice to, and send some of those love vibes to them. In Judaism, we believe we're each doing our own individual work, but we do that together in collective communal care. Inhaling together. Big exhale. Couple more of those. Inhaling. Big exhale. And our offerings of love for the world, for our families, for our communities, for ourselves. And our offering to be present to what is happening now so that we can respond. Listen for any last wisdom that Judaism has to teach us about holding the both of these in 1 month. When you're ready, you can turn your eyes towards our Zoom, lift the corners of your mouth to the sky, find some eyes on another Zoom box that's smiling back at you, saying, "Good job, we showed up today. We're doing this together." And knowing that being someone present in spiritual time is not always easy or a walk in the park, but it is rich and meaningful, and we're doing it together. Chodesh Tov, everyone. Happy new moon of Av. Thank you for being present and playing with me today. And I'll pass it back over to Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Sarah. We seal this beautiful teaching and practice with an opportunity to recite the Mourner's Kaddish. So for all those who are observing a yortzeit, honoring the memory of someone who has passed or in a period of mourning, you're welcome to share the name or the names of those that you are honoring in the chat if you'd like. And for anyone for whom it is your custom to say the Mourner's Kaddish, you're welcome to rise in body or spirit as we recite these words together. And you can also unmute yourself. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabba
Amad Dibra Urte Yamlucha Soche B'chayef Yom Israel Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba Maya Yishtabafi Yishtabafi Romam Viet Nasei Viet Gar Nasei Leila Shalom
עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ויעקור ישראל והכל ישבי תבל וימרו אמן.
Amen.
Thank you again, Sarah, for that beautiful teaching. Before we close, Jet will share again in our chat box the link to our website where if you are all able or moved, you can make a donation in support of this work that we do here at IJS. Again, we're so grateful for your support in whatever form that takes, and for all of you, just for helping to create this beautiful, sacred community of practice every day. So for those who are leaving now, we wish you well-being and shalom, and hope to see you again tomorrow at the same time. And all are welcome to stay on now for about 15 minutes. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask Sarah regarding her practice or teaching, or to share your reflections, anything that came up for you in today's practice, you're welcome to do so. And you can do that in the chat. If you do have a question, please write it in the chat and preempt it with the word question in all caps, if possible. So that will help us just to see your question. So Sarah, I'll go ahead and get our conversation started with a question of my own. First of all, thank you again so much for that beautiful and deeply resonant invitation to open our hearts to the themes of this month of Av, and really heard you emphasizing the power and the importance of doing that together, and just really appreciated that. One thing that came up for me that I'm curious if you could speak on a little bit from your own experience was actually some resistance to opening to feelings of grief and loss and sadness. And I think especially this month of Av, this year, probably many of us are feeling that this Av carries a different kind of weight, given the incredibly difficult year that we have shared as a Jewish community. And so I'm just curious if you could speak a little bit more on why and how we might open to sadness or grief or loss in a time where there's already been so much of it, how we can do so in a gentle way, how we can honor the resistance that might come up there.
Great question. Something I notice in myself too. And something I've been sitting with also with this year. I think my default to the answer of why do it in years that are sad, why do more of it, is because for me, I find there's a practice in doing what the theme is for that month and seeing how it tracks over time, over many years, and having the calendar be just, it's not like I'm sitting and I'm sad my whole day, or that I'm not going to be present to the sadnesses that are true in the world and my immediate community and loved ones and places I care about when it's the other side of the month. Like that doesn't just stop, but I love that Judaism invites me to create containers of time for me to feel and to give myself permission to be an emotional human being that is not afraid of hard things or uncomfortable things. And there's a million different ways to turn it. So that's my best case for why I do it. And I don't want to just do a dar where it's happy on years when there's a lot to be joyous about, because I mean, there's so many places in Judaism. We also feel that it's like the more that you can allow yourself to be present with a feeling, the more you're going to allow yourself to do that in other times. So the more that we're comfortable with our sadness, the more that we will be able to feel joy. And I want to be someone who's alive and awake and available for the range of emotions that come up with being a human being, and someone who cares a lot about other people and this world and my Jewish community and being part of a link in a chain to something as a granddaughter and a mother, and that all of that matters. And I want to be emotionally strong to be ready for what it is. And I think because I had that practice, I've given myself space in this year to both cry so deep on the floor of sadness and despair, because it's true, but also give myself a chance to dance and feel nourished and feel as whole as I can in a time where there's so much to not feel whole about. And in the with underneath all of that, it's like that's good for my mental health. And so it works. So that's kind of my answer to it. And I don't always look forward to the summertime because I've been attuned to the Hebrew calendar for some time in my life, and it's challenging. It's hard to be present for that. But with awareness, we can respond rather than react. So I'd rather know how I'm feeling this way and give myself the space to hold it so that it doesn't come out in a sideways way against somebody else. That wasn't my intention to continue to perpetuate more grief.
I mean, Sarah, thank you.
What do you think?
I just really thank you for the incredible wisdom that you just share. There's so much there. And, one thing I heard also in what you were saying, and something I think a lot about, for me, that following the Hebrew calendar, and as you said, being present to the Hebrew calendar is really such a cornerstone of my own spiritual practice. And I think, there is some deep intelligence to the rhythm and the cycle of this calendar that might be beyond what we can comprehend, and certainly is a zooming out, right? We can zoom out of our personal or collective current griefs and sorrows. There's a story unfolding on a yearly basis and beyond, in our just story of life. And so there's something to these rhythms in the year that can just help create a container for the full spectrum of our human experience. And I loved what you said around, how opening to grief helps to open to joy and everything in between as well. And I think also it's true that when we're in a time of acute grief, it doesn't mean that we don't also have, as you said, moments in the day of joy or just simultaneous things that we feel all kinds of other emotions about as well. So one thing I'm really taking from what you're saying is just again the like reverence for the intelligence of the emotional experience. If we can be in relationship to it with awareness and less like controlling, right? Or making it right or wrong.
Yeah. I know I also want to caveat that some people are going through really, really, really hard stuff. And when we're there, it's important to get the support that you need.
Yeah.
And more than just maybe a daily sit or even what the Hebrew calendar can do that
Yeah.
to get the care that you need. And that's also why I emphasize community so much, because Jewish practice, it's to say to be aware of the present moment with, and maybe that's different kind of language, but it's definitely to pay attention to Rosh Chodesh. I'm sorry to break it to you guys, but that's the first commandment that God gave the Israelites upon leaving Egypt. It's right there, first commandment in Exodus, to pay attention to the new moon, not like a woo-woo thing. There's like something there.
Yeah.
And it's not always pretty. And it is going to be meaningful to you in your life in different ways. And we should be definitely getting the support that we need in other ways. But it is not, Jewish wisdom is saying do that, but definitely do it in community. That is sort of like the bread and butter of Jewish practice, is the dance between learning, processing it for our own selves, and doing it with other people. So when it comes to being in a really hard time, it's better to be doing it together for sure. And when it's at a really good time, better to be doing it together with other people. That's how we end up becoming strong. It's like weightlifting, and you can build resilience from there, and you can build hope from there. And so that's also something really important to at least my framing and understanding of Judaism and the Jewish calendar and Jewish practice in general.
I mean, yeah. And thanks for that reminder that the Rosh Chodesh observation is our first mitzvah. It's the first mitzvah for the people, right?
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
amazing.
I wish I could go back to God and be like, why is this the one you're choosing?
Right.
But we only have the rabbi's interpretation of it. And they say, because we're all of us are free. It's our own invitation
Mm-hmm.
to own our own time and pay attention to how we're putting our mind and our
Mm-hmm.
mind's eye and our action and our purpose in our life. And that the renewal of each month can be a time for you to be doing that on a cadence of a monthly practice.
Absolutely. And just this theme of hidchadshut, like the renewal that's possible not only every month, but our tradition teaches every day, every morning we give thanks for that, every breath, really, which is also such an important reminder, especially in these times of grief and loss, that it's always possible. And one of the kind of spiritual gifts of our tradition. Yeah. So Sarah, I wanna like go a little deeper into one thing that you've really been highlighting here around the importance of togetherness and community. And in your teaching, you mentioned something about, well, first of all, I wrote down this sentence because it's so beautiful. You said, "Let us be comforted by each other's presence in our ability to quest through these hard emotions together." And you also mentioned how even though we're in community as Jews, we are meant to engage in Jewish spiritual practice in community. We are also on our own individual paths. And there's also a way in which the work that we're doing of being with our emotions and our, awakening really is also an individual journey with us and God. And I'm curious if you have anything you'd like to share on that, just what it means to be individuals, right? In our own inwardness and our own relationship to the divine, and also in community, and how to kind of feel both of those things and hold that balance.
Yeah, that's a great question. My instinct is Adonai Echad, everything is one. And so I have a fervent belief in that. So I recognize that I'm different than you, and there's, definitely Jewish rabbis, Martin Buber, like so many people who have just taught about the distinction between different people being different people, but also all of us together being God or connected or the oneness of the world. And so it's just how I live. It's like, okay, I am not an elephant. That is something different than me. But also, that elephant and I are in a relationship with each other at the same time. And so where do I end and other things start? Where do I end and my daughter start? I mean, when it comes to my daughter, the science is that like actually some of her DNA is still inside of me. I gave birth to her and it stays with me. And I was in my mom, and I mean, that's really trippy human stuff, but we're different people, even though we come from each other. And so I think that's kind of where like the foundation of my spiritual practice starts, is in that distinction of myself and having my own responsibility for my own self. If I'm not going to be for me, who's going to be for me? I'm going to be for me. But then I'm also in relationship with other people in my immediate life, in my family, in my community, in my Jewish community, in my global community, what it means to be human, in my relationship to land, and that I'm in awareness of how my actions tie into those things. So the same is true for my spiritual practice and the other people that I'm around, and why I love the work that I get to do, because it's trying to help our generation. By our generation, I mean people alive now, to have this language with each other around the time that we're in to use, so that we can get closer in, like quicker into the heart with each other while we're also in our separate lives. Anyway, that's a kind of a rambly answer of like, I don't know, that's just who I am, but hopefully I was able to describe a little bit about individualization, but also community and collective care.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. So there's a question here from Lori. Lori says, through practice, I'm feeling more comfortable sitting with grief and with joy/love these days, but still very awkward about how to transition from grief to joy, knowing it should not be effortful, but just not knowing how to do that shift. Any thoughts on that, Sarah?
Okay, I've got sidetracked by these amazing comments. I need to read it. I'm feeling more comfortable sitting with grief, love these days, but I still feel awkward and transform from grief to joy, knowing it should be effortful, just not knowing how to do. I'm not sure that it's supposed to be effort, that it's not supposed to take effort. I think it's supposed to take whatever it is that you need for that year. And I will admit, I'm going to need some effort this year. I'm going to need some effort and some intentional planning to carve out the time where I am saying, this is my time where I'm going to dance. And like, lucky me, I have some friend's wedding that I'm going to go to, and I'm going to allow myself in that moment to experience the emotion of joy that I have for them and for me and witnessing it. But I invite other people to really be thoughtful about their second half of this year and do what they can to feel it. And I would also say, Lori, like more contemplation around that thought about how you might transmute the grief into the sadness for you, or how you might frame the sadness as a clearing so that something else could come in. But all of this, of course, dependent on what's going on in your life, and obviously in the backdrop of what I know everyone on this call cares deeply about, in terms of war and anti-Semitism and fears, real horrible things where humanity is on display for us, that can be really challenging. And so my sense of it, Lori, is just to like talk to other people. That's what I would do. I would journal, I would talk to other people, and I would think a lot about how I can carve out the time for me to feel those other things so that I can actually be more present with the pain that is happening right now too.
I mean, and I would add like some cultivation practices, right? Sometimes we practice in the like chesed or blessing practice inspired by the metta tradition around like, may I feel joyful, just like remembering and recalling those states, and just even tuning into subtle, pleasant experiences that might be available can really help as well.
There are some sweet comments here. I also Harrison's The Amen Effect, and I love that book, and I think that book is definitely a very themed in general. So obviously Sharon Brous is incredible. So I wanted to lift that up as if someone's looking for a great book that will allow you. I cried tears of sadness and joy in that book. So I wanted to say that.
Awesome. And just to kind of wrap us up here, someone asked, where can I read about the new moon in Judaism? And I don't know if you have suggestions, Sarah, but I can certainly recommend going to At the Wells website. They have a tremendous amount of resources and learning about Rosh Chodesh and the different spiritual energies of the calendrical cycle. Do you have anything else to add on that, Sarah, as we're wrapping up?
At the Well is an offering because I couldn't find that many places to do more reading on the calendar. And that was almost 10 years ago. And since my commitment to bring a newsletter to my friends that grew into an organization known as At the Well, we've not missed a moon. And so we put out content, free resources, and also some paid resources and different types of programs where we're teaching about this exact thing, about the themes of the month and how you might do it as an individual and with a partner, with a group of people who might meet regularly on the new moon, and that be your group, and just in general. So At the Well is an offering, and I'm proud that now there's a place I can really say that there's great resources. And there's also in the past 10 years have been a lot of other writings that have happened too about just contemplating how to be present with the nowness through a Jewish lens. So IJS is another great place. And obviously has the best pun because you get to say obviously all month, but the next month, spoiler alert, Elul is rich. There's going to be so much content coming across the Jewish world for it. So I'm really excited to get to the other side of this month. There's so many other really great spiritual teachings we get to sit with as the foundation for how we might navigate that time.
Amen. Thank you again so much, Sarah, for being with us and sharing your wisdom today. And thank you, everyone, for coming together to welcome in this new moon of Av and open our hearts to the grief and the love and everything in between. We hope to see you tomorrow at the same time.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me. Chodesh